Hi, this is Congressman Tom Cole. This is another one of our congressional chats. This is a short work week in Congress, but it's an important week for sort of setting the tone of where things are going. So there's two big things that happened this week, or in one case haven't happened, and that's we funded almost all the government. We did a really good job. These were bipartisan bills, bicameral in the sense that they passed both the House and the Senate. Each of the bills had significant Democratic support. Frankly, the things that passed wouldn't have passed without Democratic and Republican votes. Overwhelming majority of Republicans voted for these bills. Donald Trump endorsed all the bills that passed. So obviously it's Republican House, Republican Senate, Republican President. But I want to tip my hat to Democrats that worked with us on this. I mean, we got 21 Democratic votes to keep almost all the government funded. And we lost 21 Republican votes, so we really needed those 21 Democrats. I particularly want to thank my colleague Rosa DeLauro from Connecticut. She's my Democratic counterpart, the ranking member. She probably took a lot of flack for voting with the Republican majority, but she didn't want the government to close down. And she knew that we'd made a good faith effort working with her to find common ground, and we'd made legitimate compromises. We've done that throughout our career. We've worked together really closely for over a decade now. We're very different. I'm a conservative Republican. She's a liberal Democrat, but we know how to come to a deal with one another. Whenever one of us is in the majority, the other's in the minority, and we understand the emphasis is going to change, but neither of us want to see the shutdown. I think we saw the same thing happen for all but one of the Senate bills. The really defining problem for us right now is Democrats simply have broken their agreement in the United States Senate over the Department of Homeland Security. And they want big time changes in immigration and customs enforcement, and probably on the Border Patrol as well. The problem is they're already funded. So you can't interrupt their funding, you can't change their funding. They were funded in separate legislation. So what they're doing is taking parts of Homeland Security that are unrelated and denying funding. And that means when you go to the airport, your TSA agent is trying to make sure that you're going to get on a secure plane and nobody's getting on the plane with things they shouldn't have. That person's not getting paid. Or air traffic controllers, they're getting their base pay, but we put a raise in there for them. They're not getting that. Or the Coast Guard, that's 56,000 American men and women in uniform that protect our coast, that help Americans with maritime accidents and tragedies at sea. They're not getting paid. It's the Secret Service. We had Secret Service agents protecting this last weekend the private residence of the President of the United States against somebody with a gun and a gas can. And they weren't getting paid. They're just out there doing their job. Cybersecurity, we know there's constant Chinese efforts and Iranian and North Korean to penetrate, steal our secrets, to disrupt our infrastructure, what have you. The people that defend us from that aren't getting paid, and those agencies will close down. FEMA, we're on the edge of tornado season in Oklahoma. I promise you, the state's likely to be hit at some point any spring. We've got wildfires in Oklahoma. We'll need FEMA help at some point. Much of the country's gone through a brutal snowstorms and ice storms, and yet FEMA can't deploy its people robustly, and frankly, its amount of funds are diminishing very rapidly. I don't know if anybody's mad at the Coast Guard or the Secret Service or FEMA, so why shouldn't they get paid and be funded? And so I very much regret that Senate Democrats, to achieve an unrelated policy objective that they cannot achieve this way, have once again chosen to shut down part of the government. It's irresponsible, it's irrational, and frankly, it's dangerous. It puts every American at more risk. These same senators that did this, they're getting on airplanes. I'd be embarrassed to walk past an air traffic controller if I hadn't voted to try and pay them. And I can tell you, in Oklahoma, you can be proud of your representatives. Every single one of them has voted to try and keep the government open and certainly pay them. And both our senators have been on the right side of this fight, so I'm very pleased with where we're at. But look, you can have all the disagreements you want. That's what elections are for. That's how you, but you don't shut down the federal government. I've seen both sides do it in my career. I always disassociated myself from that when my party did it. Always voted to reopen the government on any vehicle that I could. And I'm amazed to see Democrats have now done this 3 times in 4 months. 3 times. And they haven't achieved any policy objective when they got it done. And I do want to applaud those Democrats that helped us keep most of the government open. Again, I had 21 of my colleagues, and I mentioned Rosa DeLauro, but people like Jim Clyburn and Steny Hoyer, who were longtime leaders of the Democratic Party and who engaged in the negotiations over the appropriations bills. They're both appropriators. Other members that just simply thought this was wrong. So that took a lot of courage for them to do. We have one United States Senator on the Democratic side who's done this, John Fetterman from Pennsylvania, pretty consistently voted to keep the government open. That's one of his core. Doesn't mean he agrees with everything there, but it's just at the end of the day, he's not going to shut down the government. So we got to get past this as a country. Again, it's dangerous and irresponsible, and I just urge my colleagues to sit down and negotiate this. And this is not something we're going to solve in the Appropriations Committee. This is really a negotiation between the President of the United States and Democrats in the Senate, particularly Senator Schumer, the Democratic leader. It's important that you know the majority of the House and the majority of the United States Senate are in favor of keeping the government open. We have over 50 votes in the United States Senate. Our challenge is you have to get to 60 in the Senate. That's their rules. In the House, where all we have to do is get to 51, we kept the government open. And again, it took some Democrats to help us do that, because we can get every single Republican. Some of them, literally, even though Donald Trump was urging them to vote for these bills, thought they were the right things, voted no. Well, that's up to them. But the point is, we had a bipartisan negotiation, and that's why at least a number of really prominent Democrats felt comfortable in working with us to do that. So I'm pleased with that. So we've been working on that. The highlight of the week, though, for the public is unquestionably the State of the Union address that the President delivered on last night, really. I would say this. I mean, first of all, if you like Donald Trump, you love the speech. I mean, it was a great speech, the longest speech in American history. If you don't like Donald Trump, you probably didn't like the speech. I mean, but I would tell you, I've seen him speak many, many times in many venues. I thought this was the best speech he's ever given. And again, his opponents won't like some of the digs at the other side. He takes a lot of arrows himself. So I thought he was actually mostly funny and frankly kind of poking in good humor at the Democrats. And look, they do have a hard time knowing the difference between getting up and applauding a Medal of Honor winner. They don't have to applaud every proposal the president makes. They shouldn't. I certainly wouldn't if the roles were reversed and didn't win President Biden and President Obama. But I don't think I ever sat down when somebody introduced a Medal of Honor winner. And I have to say, in that regard, last night was like the greatest show on earth. I mean, there's 2 Medal of Honor winners, really worthy recipients. One who got hurt in the superb operation in Venezuela that captured former President Maduro and got him removed from the country and where he belongs, in an American court of justice. And it was an expertly done deal. And there was one guy that was seriously wounded, but finished his mission and got his soldiers, the helicopter pilot, in and out safely. And it was an appropriate thing. And the president also said we're going to award 10 other medals to other people that did a great job in that in a private ceremony at the White House. That was good. And then there's a 100-year-old, Navy fighter pilot who flew planes in World War II in Korea and in Vietnam. I met him actually not only last night, but this morning. There was a reception for him. I went by to meet him. He's amazing. I mean, I don't expect to be alive at 100, but if I am, I want to be like this guy. I mean, he's alert, he's sharp, he's funny, but he shot down four Russian MiGs in Korea in 1952. And it's a pretty extraordinary story. He and a wingman took on 6 MiGs, and they put them on straight wing aircraft. They were not in jet aircraft. And they took down 5 of the 6. The wingman got 1, this guy got 4. And but because we were sensitive to the American people knowing the Russians were actually flying these missions, it was classified, and nobody could hear about it. So he never got an award. Now, he actually met privately with then General Eisenhower. Eisenhower had not yet become president, on his trip to Korea. Funny story he told me about, Ike likes scotch and offered him a drink, and he likes bourbon. And Ike said, well, this scotch is really better. General, I said, so you told the future commander-in-chief that you had to have bourbon instead of scotch? He said, yeah, and I got bourbon. I mean, just funny guy. But a real hero. And one of these things that there was a lot of debate in the military because it was classified and nobody was 100% sure. And then I'm told by the member who made this happen, my friend Darrell Issa from California, who's worked on this for years to get this guy the recognition that he deserves. He managed to the one surviving Russian pilot did a post, combat report too, and it was classified in Russia because they weren't supposed to be there. And it came out 50 years or so after the encounter and verified everything that the American pilot had said and sort of reignited interest in this extraordinary story. But I mean, stop and think. So the President of the United States is there. We're giving 2 medals of honor away. We're giving a Presidential Medal of Freedom away to the hockey goalie at Canada. The entire men's, or most of the men's, hockey team is there in the press gallery coming out, chants of USA, enormous pride. On that one, everybody's on their feet. So that was really cool. Then you've got the uncle just freed from a Venezuelan prison camp, pops out of a door, and his niece, who has no idea he's coming, is there. He had some really moving things. The mother of a young Ukrainian woman who's killed in Charlotte, North Carolina, by a mentally disturbed, vicious and violent criminal who had been incarcerated 12 times and then let out. Should never have been out. Should have been in a mental institution. Just kills this woman. How can you not be sympathetic for that? Or people that were injured or killed in car accidents with people that are in the country illegally and have commercial driver's license. It was a masterful performance of compelling stories that personalized important issues. And again, while there was a lot of back and forth between Republicans and Democrats, and certainly between the president and Democrats, there were occasions where everybody was on their feet. Look, when the United States president says we're never going to let Iran have a nuclear weapon when they're the largest sponsor of terrorism in the world, I saw some of my Democratic colleagues get up and they believe that too. So there are things that we do agree on, work together on, find common ground on. But I got to tell you, if you like politics, it was, as I read somebody this morning called him the showman in chief, and the president was every bit that. You could tell the guy knows how to put together a spectacle. He did it for over a dozen years when he had one of the leading television series in the country. He is a showman. He is different. There's nobody quite like him. I agree with all that when both friend and critic say it. But I thought last night was one of his finest performances. I thought he made his point. He defended what he has done this year, which I agree with and have supported. I was very proud of him last night, proud of the manner in which he delivered that speech. I thought the end of the speech, if you don't like Donald Trump, just fast forward to the end, about the last 5 or 6 minutes of the speech. because that was really uplifting. It was very Reagan-esque. It was very city on a hill, visionary. Talked about the things that bind us together as Americans, our common values, our common beliefs, our care for one another, even when we disagree with one another. It was a very uncharacteristic address for the president, and I liked it. I thought it was a really fitting end. So I don't know who wrote the speech, but I will tell you, unlike a lot of Donald Trump speeches, this one was probably given as written. I thought he did a really good job, and I thought he was disciplined throughout. But I think he had fun. He's still Donald Trump. He's not gonna ever be, somebody that's different than he is. What you see is what you get, and again, about half the American people like that, and a little bit less than half don't. So he's always going to be a polarizing figure. But this was a really good moment, and I think he delivered a very spirited and thoughtful defense of his policies and his position on everything from tariffs to taxes to building up the military to deregulation to energy development. It was a substantive speech, but it was without question a colorful speech, and well worth listening. I've had the privilege of listening to President Bush and President Obama, President Trump, President Biden, and now President Trump again. So I've heard a lot of these. This was my, 24th inaugural speech that I've listened to. This was the most unusual, and I think in many ways the best, the ones that I've heard. And it certainly, the speech fit the man. The different speakers can give different kinds of speeches, and you might write one speech for Ronald Reagan that you would never write for George Bush, or you would never write for Barack Obama, or something, not just philosophy, but rhetorically, who can deliver what. And I don't think there's ever been a better political communicator in my lifetime than Ronald Reagan. I mean, I think but my gosh, the guy was an actor. He kind of well, you saw, again, I think of Trump as a showman. And last night you saw him as a showman, I think, putting on the greatest show on earth, at least the greatest political show on earth, from the Congress. He dominated the room from beginning to end, and he questioned who the center of attention was. But also, I appreciated the using of the moments to honor people like our Medal of Honor winners, to honor people like our hockey team that both men and women. The women team wasn't there, but they sent a very gracious, we can't make it. We're so honored to be invited. There was no, controversy about that. And so there were a lot of heroes honored. There were a lot of people facing tragic situations that were recognized. And there were a lot of points made about policy with anecdotes and examples. And I think that's good, and I think it was well done. Now, what the political impact will be, I don't know, but I will tell you, every Republican in that room was pretty charged up. They felt like the president had done a masterful job stating their case, and the case for what we've done as a Congress and what we believe and stand for as a party. And hey, people agree or disagree with that. This is America, that's fine. But I thought last night was a very, very special time. Just my opinion. Others may have a different one. Let me just end with this. We also this year, there's a lot of politics that is just nuts and bolts, and is not particularly glamorous, but it has to get done. And this week on the Appropriations Committee that I'm responsible for, we release guidance to individual members. Here's how, if you're not on the Appropriations Committee, or even if you are, you can submit community projects. You maybe need help on a water or sewage system or a bridge or whatever. This is how you can submit language for the committees to consider putting in their bills. There'll still be an amendment process, so there'll be time to do more later. But I can tell you from having done legislation for a lot of years, if you can get it in the bill, that's a lot easier than an amendment. So you propose language, you deal with it, and we look at all the language, even from our Democratic colleagues, because there are lots of things that we work with in common. I have a lot of good Democrat friends that I work with on Native American issues. I have a lot of good Democratic friends that care about things like career tech because their communities are short of electricians and plumbers and mechanics and those kind of things. I have a lot of Democratic friends we work closely with on biomedical research at the National Institute of Health. So this is where, so all the rules are set up. Here's how you can do it. Here's who to contact to deal with to get it done early. And then we, made some tweaks on the process of submitting projects and ideas. We increased the number that individual members could actually do. We opened up an area that would allow members to do more for hospitals and healthcare facilities that we did not have available last year. So it's just that kind of thing. We're talking now, I had a long discussion yesterday with the chairman of the budget committee. They're supposed to set our top line. They didn't last year. They were busy doing the big, beautiful bill. And we never got an agreement between the president and the legislative leadership. So we just sort of did it on our own on the appropriations committee. We'll do it again if we have to, but it's not the preferred way. We've been dealing with the administration, reminding them we need your budget. It's legally due. There's no penalty in not getting to it, but you have a better chance of getting what you want as an administration the sooner we can see and begin the hearing process. And if you don't get these things to it, if our budget committee can't produce a budget that can pass the House, not just their committee, but the House floor, if the administration doesn't get us their budget in a timely fashion, we're not waiting around. We're holding hearings. We'll just start marking up bills. We're going to be very aggressive. So that kind of nuts and bolts stuff, nobody covers, and most people aren't interested in, has to happen. And I just want you to know we're hard at work on the Appropriations Committee. I'm sure this is true on all the other committees. They're doing their work too. So there's a lot of hearings, there's a lot of things that again aren't glamorous, but I keep an eye on what goes on, not just in my committee, but the others. I can tell you the House Armed Services Committee is hard at work. What are we going to do on aircraft carriers? What do we need to do on, E3s versus the E7 wedge-tail? All this kind of stuff that people's eyes would glaze over. Congress really is working on and very seriously and doing it in a bicameral and bipartisan way. And we're having a lot of discussions, again, with our colleagues, not just in the House on the other side of the aisle, but in the Senate on both sides of the aisle, in terms of how we proceed, in terms of scheduling, passing bills, making sure the government stays funded as it is for the most part this year, and moving through what's called regular order up here so that every member has an opportunity to get their suggestion, their idea seriously considered by the Committee of Jurisdiction. We have to do that on our committee for 12 different bills. So it's quite an undertaking, but it's underway and moving. So we'll look forward to visiting with you in the weeks ahead. This is obviously an election year. I can promise you that colors politics and policy making and the rhythm of what can be done and will be done ahead of an election. And just kind of works that way, but we'll try to keep you informed of the ins and outs, things we think are important to Oklahoma, and certainly what we're doing on the critical issues that you're reading about, hearing about, and quite often contacting our office about. So with that, I hope things are going well for you and your family in this relatively new year. I hope I can be positive next week and tell you we've gotten the Department of Homeland Security finally funded and taken care of. I'm concerned about that, and that we have continued to make steady legislative progress on issues that are important to the American people. So with that, good luck, God bless, and look forward to visiting with you next week.